In order to help you prepare for the final exam, we're going to go through the review guide and discuss the answers to the questions. We're going to start with number 1. So tell at least 3 things that you need to do in the lab to be safe. Obviously, there's more than 3 lab safety rules that you need to know to be safe in the lab, so the more rules you write, the better prepared you'll be for the final. So the first thing to keep in mind is when you're in the lab, you need to wear any required safety equipment the entire time you're in the lab. So if goggles, gloves, aprons are required, then you need to keep them on until you are finished cleaning up the lab. Next one, tie back long hair. If you've got loose or baggy clothing, like a jacket that has baggy sleeves, a scarf, a lanyard, long necklaces, anything that could dangle in the chemicals or could knock over a beaker needs to either be secured or removed. If you have a mistake in the lab, if you spill something, if you break something, make sure you let me know right away. If it's a spill, we need to make sure that we get you cleaned up so that you don't have chemicals left on your skin, or we get it cleaned off the lab table to make sure there's no chemical residues left behind. If glass is broken, it needs to go in the sharps box. If it happens to break in your hand, you can just take it straight to the sharps box, but if not, you do not pick up broken glass. Use a broom to sweep it up, and then it goes in the sharps box. Number 2, tell 3 things you need to avoid doing in order to be safe in the lab. Never eat, drink, or chew gum or taste anything in the lab. In other words, nothing goes in your mouth in the lab. Even if it looks like food, it is no longer edible if it is in the lab. Don't bring anything to the lab except your pen, pencil, or lab paper. Your lab table needs to be clear and not cluttered so that you have plenty of space to work and not bump into your chemicals. Do not goof off in the lab. You need to be responsible, not waving your arms around, not dancing around, not running. You are responsible for the safety of the people around you. You do not have the right to goof off and endanger anyone around you. Do not touch your eyes, nose, or face while in the lab. If you do have an itchy nose, itchy eyes, need to blow your nose, wash your hands first and then step away from the lab before you touch or scratch your face. Do not touch lab equipment unless you have permission to do so. So don't make up experiments. Don't start touching equipment before we start the lab. Wait until you have permission in order to do something. Number 3, what do you need to do before you start a lab? Always read all directions before you start a lab. Don't just read 1 or 2 directions and assume you're good. Make sure you know everything that you need to be prepared for before you start the lab. Number 4 is extra credit, but let's talk through it anyways. What 3 things do you have to keep in mind when using chemicals at the stock table? For one, there's not enough chemicals for everybody, and so do not take the chemicals back to your desk. Always use them at the stock table. So take a graduated cylinder with you, measure out the amount that you need, and take that graduated cylinder back to your desk. When you're done pouring the chemicals that you need, make sure you put the cap back on the chemical. Don't assume the person next to you is going to use those chemicals. Put the lid back on, and never, ever, ever pour chemicals back into the bottle. So if you pour too much in your graduated cylinder, you can either ask if someone else needs it or ask me how to dispose of it properly. Number 5, we already talked about what you need to do if you break glass. Make sure it goes in the sharps box. Make sure it gets swept up. Do not pick it up by hand. Number 6, what must you do while using the high power lens of the microscope? Now, once you've properly gotten up to the high power lens, so you've looked at it under the low power, medium, you've made sure you found it and it's focused well. When you get up to the high power, you need to first make sure that you turn the high power lens down without hitting the stage. And so therefore you might have to raise the high power lens a little bit in order to turn it. Then lower the high power lens as low as it can go, as close to the stage as it can go without touching the slide. Once you've got it as low as it can go, then you can simply raise the lens while you're looking through the microscope. If you are only raising the lens, then you can't hit the lens with the slide. If you are lowering the lens, you could hit the slide. And so if you have to lower it again to focus it, then you need to look to the side, lower the lens, and then only look through the microscope while you are raising it. Make sure that while you're looking through it, you are only using the fine focus knob, that's the smaller knob. Otherwise, if you try to do this with the coarse focus knob, you will go too fast and you will miss the focus. Last one, what must you do when you finish a lab? Well, you need to clean up your area, clean all of your lab materials, put lab equipment back where it goes, and of course, wash your hands. Even if you are just using something like a microscope and you don't think that your hands are dirty, you must wash your hands after a lab. If you've touched the lab materials or you've touched the lab tables, there's a chance of getting chemicals on your skin. You must wash your hands with soap and water. Purell or other hand sanitizers will not do the job.